Ladies and gentlemen, thank you for joining the World Leaders Session. This session offers the opportunity to hear and benefit from the insights of global leaders on the main theme of this year's Jeju Forum, Re-engineering Peace for Asia. I would like to hand over the stage to Dr. Hong Seok-hyun, the chairman of Chung-Ang Holdings, who will chair this session. Everyone, please welcome Dr. Hong Seok-hyun.
Well, good morning, ladies and gentlemen. It's a pleasure to once again chair the Jeju Forum's World Leaders Session. I'm very honored to have three highly distinguished speakers join me this morning. To my left, former United Nations Secretary General, His Excellency Ban Ki-moon, and former Prime Minister of Canada, His Excellency Brian Mulroney, and former Prime Minister of Japan, His Excellency Yasuo Fukuda. And Mr. Ban and Mr. Fukuda are no strangers to the Jeju Forum, while I believe this is Mr. Mulroney's first time at this annual gathering. Thank you, gentlemen. It's great to have you all here. This session is supposedly to last 90 minutes, but because of delay, we will have about 70 minutes. We will have first three keynote speeches from the speakers, followed by a discussion around this year's main theme of re-engineering peace for Asia. I believe we have a very compelling and timely theme in light of recent developments surrounding the Korean Peninsula, Northeast Asia, and beyond. Just 2 weeks ago, the eyes of the world were fixed at the historic first summit between the leaders of the United States and North Korea in Singapore. Putting aside 7 decades of confrontation, President Donald Trump and the North Korean leader Kim Jong-un met in an unprecedented face-to-face and agreed to improve their relations. They have taken the bold first step to achieve complete denuclearization and to establish a lasting peace on the Korean Peninsula. This is undeniably a tectonic shift for the region, with the North Korean leader at the very center of great change. After declaring late last year that his country's quest for nuclear weapons was complete, Kim Jong-un pledged to focus on the economy. Since then, he has held 2 summits with the South Korean President Moon Jae-in and 1 with President Trump, and had 3 meetings with the Chinese leader, Xi Jinping. And not to be left out from these developments, I understand Japan and Russia are working to set up their own summits with the North Korean leader. With this new great game playing out on the Korean Peninsula and Northeast Asia, the world is watching to see whether it will break down the post-Cold War confrontational mood between the 2 Koreas, as well as between the South Korea, US, Japan maritime bloc, and the North Korea, China, Russia continental bloc. But I believe everything depends on North Korea's sincerity in the denuclearization process? Will North Korea implement complete, verifiable, irreversible denuclearization to reach peace agreement? Will North Korea normalize relationship with the US and secure a guarantee of its regime? And will it be able to develop its economy as a normal nation? I think with these questions, we'll see the wisdom and perspectives of the leaders here today. But before we get to our discussions, I would like to ask former United Nations Secretary General Ban Ki-moon to start us off with his keynote address. Secretary General, podium is yours.
Thank you, Honorable Chairman Hong Seok-hyun, for your warm introduction and laying out some basic lines of what has been transpiring in this very important season. And I'd like to welcome our distinguished panelists, former Prime Minister of Canada and former Prime Minister of Japan. And I'd like to thank for all your support and many distinguished guests, ambassadors and ministers, and particularly young students. And thank you for your support. It's my great pleasure and privilege to join this time-honored and prestigious Jeju Forum again. It's my first time as former Secretary General, but I was here at least 2 times. Since its inception in 2001, I'm glad that the Jeju Forum has served as a dynamic platform for sharing vision on sustainable peace and prosperity on the Korean Peninsula and the Greater Asia. And I believe its stature today perfectly encapsulates my vision at the start of my tenure as United Nations Secretary General. When I was assuming this, I sent the message to Korean people that Korean government and people should strive to bring Korea to the world and to bring world to Korea. In Korean, 세계 속의 한국 and 한국 속의 세계. Excellencies, distinguished guests, ladies and gentlemen, our world is ever-changing, resulting in increased uncertainties, risks, and concerns. New technologies such as artificial intelligence, biotechnology, and robotics are altering how we communicate, how we live, and how we work. Eventually, they will have far-reaching and massive implications for the future of humanity. That means that these technological advances are shifting interrelationship between countries and individuals. They also change the way of international politics, which is becoming evident on various spheres. Protectionism, nationalisms are threatening democracies and multilateral systems. The values of global citizenship, which had been expanding through the world, is now weakening. As every one of you are concerned, some countries in the position of global leadership who have championed universal values and global citizenship over the several decades have been stepping backward. Among them, the United States has decided to withdraw from the Paris Climate Accord, JCPOA, Joint Comprehensive Plan of Action on Iran's nuclear program, TPP, Trans-Pacific Partnership, UNESCO, and most recently, Human Rights Council. Some of the European countries too, which have represented inclusiveness, tolerance, and humanitarian spirit are also moving toward becoming exclusive and intolerant societies. It is frustrating to see these countries are building walls against each other and the rest of the world. Even the G7 seems to be faltering. While working at the United Nations, I had been urging the world leaders, please do not erect walls among peoples. Instead, build bridges among peoples and countries. Ladies and gentlemen, we should learn from the past history. Those who do not learn from past history will have no chance to succeed. History has taught us that nationalism, intolerance, and exclusiveness had brought about disastrous consequences to the people in Europe and the rest of the world, particularly during the first half of the 20th century. Despite these disappointing developments, I firmly believe that there are still hope in changing the world for the better. And this change can start right here in this region. In this regard, theme of this forum, re-engineering peace and advance a new era of prosperity for Asia, is especially relevant and timely. But to realize this hope, we need to work together to rebuild multilateral diplomacy, robust security cooperation and partnership, and faith in our globalized economy. We cannot deny the fact that this world is becoming increasingly more interconnected with a transformative science and technology advancement. We are living in a very small, interconnected, small planet Earth. Therefore, global challenges can only be addressed through inherently global solutions and renewed global citizenship. One of the important lessons I had learned while serving at the United Nations is that not a single country, I repeat again, not a single country or person can solve this problem, however one may be powerful and resourceful. We have to work together. The lesson is still effective today. We must work together. We must pool all of our resources and wisdom. And international peace and security should be more coordinated and aligned with sustainable development and human rights. This understanding has guided me during my 10 years as Secretary General of the United Nations to work tirelessly for the advancement of peace, development, and human rights throughout the world, including here on the Korean Peninsula. Ladies and gentlemen, North Korea's nuclear weapons and missile programs development have been causing tensions on the Korean Peninsula and deep international concern. This has resulted in new threats and challenges to our global security architecture. In the recent months, numerous sustained efforts have been taken to step up our collective action to address this long-standing issue of grave concern. Therefore, I warmly welcome the string of diplomatic developments regarding the situation on the Korean Peninsula, including the Pyeongchang Winter Olympic Games, as well as President Moon Jae-in's consistent and committed efforts to bring reconciliation and peace on the Korean Peninsula, which have been declared on April 27 in Panmunjom between the two leaders of Korea. And President Moon's efforts has also set the stage to restart U.S.-North Korea dialogue, which was actualized at the historic Leaders Summit in Singapore just 2 weeks ago. This demonstrates how future-oriented dialogue can facilitate an elevation of tensions and the building of mutual trust and peace between the two Koreas as well as between US and North Korea. However, we must cautiously move forward with a sober assessment of these positive yet quick shifting developments, as well as an understanding of the multiple dynamics at hand. In terms of inter-Korean relations, this is certainly not an easy issue. We have had inter-Korean summits in 2000 and 2007, but there was little sustainable development forward because of North Korea's reneged promises. Therefore, we must all keep focused on our ultimate objective, the complete, verifiable, and irreversible dismantlement, CBID, of North Korean nuclear devices and programs. We simply do not have the luxury of time to relax as Kim Jong-un makes amicable gestures. And failure is not an option. We can hope for the best, but at the same time, we must prepare for the worst. Moving forward, I would also like to re-emphasize the greater need for enhanced coordination between the United States and Korea, Republic of Korea, on all levels and in all spheres during this process. Bolstering the synchronization of the US-ROC alliance is critical as both tracks develop, and we do need to ensure that our diplomats and militaries are on the same page to maintain strong posture of our alliance. Our alliance was established based on values of liberty, equality, and human rights. The value of alliance cannot be measured in terms of dollars and cents. Our alliance should be extended to the point that these values are shared with the people of Asia and the rest of the world. In this regard, I would caution against any sudden move that would possibly undercut the strength of US-ROC alliance and its central role as the bedrock of security and stability on the Korean Peninsula and Northeast Asia. Excellencies, ladies and gentlemen, to ensure that we capitalize on the present moment, we must understand that a holistic solution, comprehensive solution to the peace and security situation on the Korean Peninsula cannot be achieved by just two Koreas alone. Similarly, this cannot be solved solely through US-North Korea talks. Indeed, pressing issues of global significance requires inherently global solutions. In this regard, we need an all-hands-on-deck policies and approach in our pursuit of peace on the Korean Peninsula. This includes active cooperation and support from all directly concerned countries, including US, Japan, China, and Russia, as well as from other Asian nations, the United Nations, and the rest of the international community. I also believe that UN Security Council should remain as a strong international sanctions until there are concrete denuclearization measures from North Korea. Otherwise, we run the risk of repeating past mistakes and seeing them achieve their goals through deceptive negotiations. Excellencies, ladies and gentlemen, let me conclude this brief presentation. In the history of human beings, there has been no moment of zero risks and challenges. Yet history has proven that we have overcome past adversities through collective wisdom and partnership. In the face with new challenges of high technologies and egocentric nationalism, we need to exercise our collective wisdom and renew our commitment for global citizenship. It will be also applied to the North Korean nuclear issue. We must do all that we can to realize this vision. Therefore, I'm asking, ladies and gentlemen, to work together, pool all our strength and resources and wisdom to resolve this issue peacefully and harmoniously, and leave this legacy to our succeeding generations. Generation that means peaceful and prosperous Korean Peninsula and people. I thank you for your commitment and attention. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Secretary General Ban. You're right on time. I would now like to ask Prime Minister Maloney to address the audience.
When the Korean ambassador to Canada came to visit with me to invite me to be here today, I, of course, accepted. Oh, and he said, "That's wonderful, Prime Minister. You'll be one of the keynote speakers, and you'll have 10 minutes." I said, "Well, that's very unfair." Because he said, "Why?" I said, "Because as the ambassador to Canada, surely you know that it takes any Canadian Prime Minister at least 10 minutes just to say hello." So I'll try and accept this burden today to tell you that I'm pleased to be in Jeju for this most timely forum. And I'm honored to join such an impressive panel roster. My wife Mila and I are both pleased to be back in South Korea to see firsthand the remarkable trajectory of democratic and economic success that is so visible to any country, any visitor in this country. I commend you for the topic, Re-engineering Peace for Asia. It's an objective that is very much at the center of world attention these days, and for good reason. The Singapore summit was historic, if only because it brought together the leaders of the US and North Korea for the very first time. If you believe, as I do, and as I have lived in international politics for a long time, if you believe that personalities can influence the direction of world affairs, you will undoubtedly agree that there is now hope that this new beginning will create momentum for change and for re-engineering peace in Korea and the Asian region. Just imagine what a lasting peace in Korea would mean for the world as a whole. Let me say at the outset that Canada has a very proud history of engagement militarily, diplomatically, and economically with Korea. The Korean War was one of the most significant chapters in Canada's illustrious military and peacekeeping history. More than 26,000 Canadians served on land, sea, and in the air during this bitter conflict 70 years ago. On a small population base, Canada is now approaching 40 million people. In those days, it was about 13 million. And yet, after the Great War, a year later, more than 26,000 Canadians served here, along with many others from 17 UN member states, most notably the United States. All operated under a formal UN mandate. 516 Canadians paid the ultimate sacrifice during the conflict. There are poignant monuments to their memory both in Ottawa and Busan, not far from here, where more than 300 Canadians are buried. Each monument depicts a volunteer Canadian soldier and 2 Korean children. The girl is holding a bouquet of maple leaves, the symbol of Canada and on our flag, and the boy is holding a bouquet of maple leaves and roses of Sharon, Koreans' national flower. Before that conflict, Canada's relations with Korea were quite limited, involving mainly missionaries teaching and providing health services throughout South Korea. But when the South was invaded in 1950, our Prime Minister at the time, the Right Honourable Louis Saint Laurent, chose to honour our staunch commitment to the United Nations and to the defence of peace and freedom wherever it was challenged around the world. I am proud to say that my government sustained that commitment fully from 1984 to 1993. During those 9 years, Canada participated in all 16 UN peacekeeping missions and contributed more than 10% of all troops assigned to those tasks. With 1% of the population, Canada contributed more than 10% to them all. I might add, Mr. Secretary General, who, by the way, has, in the judgment of Canadians, did a spectacularly successful job as Secretary General of the United Nations in difficult circumstances. During my time in government, I instructed our ambassador to the United Nations to pay our dues and contributions in full on January 1st of each and every year. The reason for that was, you may remember, Senator Jesse Helms was busy trying to chip away at the funding, America's funding for the United Nations, placing it at a period in time in jeopardy. And so we tried to counter that by initiating a policy which others have replicated and which is still in force today. I commend you, sir, for your stalwart service to this organization. And I tell you all, irrespective of what you hear in the United States, the United Nations, people coming together, remains the best last hope for peace for all mankind. Perhaps Canada's most memorable engagement during the Korean War was in the Kapong Valley during the spring of 1951. Along with Australian and American units, the Canadian Infantry Regiment held off advancing Chinese and North Korean forces in a gallant manner, so brave that it earned a U.S. presidential citation. That battle is commemorated annually at the National Cenotaph in Ottawa. So our roots with South Koreans and your country run deep from Canada. The Korean Peninsula is very much back in the global spotlight these days, and we can only hope that the framework concluded at the summit meeting in Singapore will eventually bear fruit for the good of the peninsula, this region, and the world. After all, the nuclear threat to peace from North Korea is probably the most dangerous flashpoints for major conflict in the world today. Just think what a better world we would have if bold leadership, vision, and diplomatic skills can bring about a complete, verifiable, and irreversible denuclearization of North Korea. Canada stands solidly behind the efforts of President Trump, and we salute President Moon Jae-in for his tactful tenacity in nurturing this extraordinary summit. There are only 2 leaders in Singapore, but we know how they got there. And the government of South Korea played a very leading role in facilitating and heralding this major diplomatic initiative. Prime Minister Fukada, I am confident, because I happen to know that Canada fully supports Japan's priorities in this vital dialogue. Your concerns about security and the illegal abduction of Japanese citizens must continue to be addressed in a forthright and ultimately successful fashion. We stand with you on each. The symbolic images from Singapore offer the promise of concrete progress, but there's also reason for prudence. History compels us not to rush to judgment about the prospects, because we have traveled this road several times before with North Korea, only to be disappointed when it failed to deliver on solemnly agreed commitments. That is why there is an absolute need for complete verification of any promises that are forthcoming. I will always remember President Reagan's premise for arms negotiations with the Soviet Union. Trust, but verify. That principle remains relative and relevant today. Simply by agreeing to meet, King Kim Jong-un obtained an unprecedented degree of legitimacy, along with some relief on sanctions from his major supporter, China. With this dialogue now underway, the maximum pressure which made it possible will inevitably wane. That is why we need to be clear-eyed and cautious about the prospect, knowing that we are dealing, and we continue to deal, with one of the most repressive regimes in the world, which infamously is known for the callous treatment of its own people. And President Trump observed, well, this is a different time, and this is a different president. And I agree. It may be as well that King Jong-un is prepared to shift his country's strategic goal away from a quest for more lethal arms intended to ensure the security of his regime to the pursuit of a more successful economy that would benefit all of his people. Time will tell. If he wants to know what benefits peace will bring, he doesn't have to travel very far. Just travel south to see the magnificence of the achievements of the South Koreans in the last 50 years. Several key elements, how to verify the pledge and make that agreement irreversible, and when or what basis the U.S. will lift economic sanctions, are not yet clear. These are among the issues that are outstanding and that underscore the daunting challenges that lie ahead. Another big question left in abeyance is how the interests of the biggest party, not at the table, China, will become part of the negotiating process. Mr. Trump says it will take 6 months or more to determine whether the effort will succeed. You might say that he played his trump card, recognizing and legitimizing Kim Jong-un in order to build trust on the agreed principles and generate momentum at the negotiating table. The United States of America does have massive economic leverage, and we in Canada, who built the largest trading partner in the history of the world with the United States, know that full well. That is, after all, what helped bring Kim to the bargaining table. Will the carrot of economic benefits be as convincing as the stick of sanctions? Some foreign policy analysts were quick to point out what was missing as opposed to what was included in the agreement. Bruce Klinger, senior research fellow at the Heritage Foundation, stated that each of the 4 main points in the agreement were in previous documents concluded with North Korea, some in a stronger and more encompassing way. Nevertheless, I see reasons for optimism. No one, absolutely no one, would have believed 30 years ago that the Soviet Union would implode, that Eastern Europe would be able to embrace democracy, and that Germany would be reunited. It happened largely as a result of bold, visionary leadership by key leaders at that time. Astute political leadership can make good things happen. When there is a bold consensus at the top, preconceived obstacles to progress can be overcome. But the essential ingredient is mutual trust. That is the key lesson I gained from direct involvement in those transformational changes in Europe almost 3 decades ago. Changes which few people, including me, thought were possible. Never doubt what the oxygen of even a limited amount of freedom might do to unseal the craving of the North Korean people for relief from their hermit kingdom. The yearning for peace, security, and prosperity is palpable everywhere, and the benefits could spread well beyond the peninsula. Freedom is the essence of our values as democratic societies. It is what stimulates innovation and enables us to improve the lives of our citizens. It is, too, the most precious asset of our societies and what distinguishes our style of government from totalitarian regimes. If the framework agreed at the Singapore summit prompts a more productive dialogue, one that delivers tangible dividends in terms of real peace, the effects will be profound and have implications for all of the world. In every sense, dialogue is more conducive to stability than the ever-present threat of a nuclear holocaust. As Winston Churchill famously said, jaw is always better than war. As staunch allies, we should use every opportunity to impress upon North Korean leadership the benefits they could achieve by becoming a more responsible member of the international community. Those advantages are apparent to anyone who can observe firsthand the dramatic difference today between North and South Korea. Just imagine how much better the land of morning calm could be if the hopes and aspirations inspired in Singapore were to become reality. This most noble endeavor offers the best hope for success and the best promise for a true peace since the end of the Korean War. That is why there is every reason to be supportive of the goal. And that is why the message from this forum to the world should be one of confidence and encouragement, urging the key players to be steadfast in using this symbolic opening to conclude genuine, verifiable commitments that will ensure a denuclearized, more peaceful, and more prosperous Korea that will benefit